If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, people who believe in the ghosts, demons, angels, etc. What exactly happened to make you start believing? I thought that I struck and killed a girl that wasn't there. I was driving home late at night from a double shift, so admittedly I was tired. I had my radio blaring to keep awake. I was driving through the backwoods on a road that I had learned to take as the occasional shortcut. During the day the road was busy and congested, but at night it was always empty save for a stray deer or raccoon. I'm driving, jamming out, and admittedly speeding. I take a corner too quickly and there in front of me was a young girl about 19 or 20 with long dark hair wearing jeans and a light-colored blouse. For a split second I saw her eyes reflected in the headlights, saw the look of shock and fear on her face, and I swerved hard off the road and into a ditch. There was no way that I didn't hit her. I jumped out of the car, and started walking back to the spot I had last seen her and flagged down a passing car to tell them to call 911. This was in the days before everyone had cell phones. Cops came, EMT came, and there was no one. No body, no girl, and I was given a sobriety test on the spot. I get home much later than I should have and my wife is waiting for me as I hadn't arrived on time. I'm shaken as I can still see the girl's face in my head, and I recant the story to my wife who goes white. She runs upstairs and grabs a yearbook and tells me to flip through the senior pictures. Page 3, there she is looking exactly as I had seen and described her. I ask my wife if she knows the girl, or if she has hers or her family's number. That's when my wife informs me that the girl died 3 years prior during a hit and run around that exact curve. I wasn't from the area, there were no ghost stories involving that road, and I had no way of knowing that the girl that I picked out of a lineup of seniors was already dead. To this day I still wonder what happened. Was I tired? Had I heard her name or seen her face on a memorial newscast or clipping and not registered it, or had I actually encountered what to this very moment I still consider the most terrifying event in my life, as I honest to God thought I was going to jail? I'm not 100% positive, but I can say this, I can still see her face lit up by my headlights clear as a goddamn bell. I also had the shadow man. Looked like a man wearing a coat with the collar turned up, and a hat with a wide brim. That figure was never in any childhood ghost story I had seen and I can't think of why I'd imagine that shape or figure. You're lucky yours just watched. Mine would move through the room with footsteps. Would stand on my bed and I could feel the bed move. Would open and close my door but strangely only a thin amount. On occasion it would tug at the covers or sometimes throw them across the room with force and I would scream. Parents thought I kicked in my sleep but nope. Father even saw this 9 feet shadow man a few years later. He saw it in the dead of night standing on the farm across from us. He described the same thing. Went out with his gun but it was gone. Years later I had a girl I just met that night see it standing behind me. We were at a live outdoor gig and she fell off her chair in terror and her first words were, "I saw your demon." She cried a lot and left to go home. She had no way of knowing about it and no reason to leave because we had paid hefty entry fees and she left after about 45 minutes. Had other experiences too that I could go into detail of that get pretty odd. Moved house at about 13 and it stopped. Went to church one evening, a youth church event, with a friend and that night it came back. I've never been religious but felt a religious presence in the church that night. Got home and had a shadow lurking above me in bed that night. It was different this time. More ominous and lacked form. Like a black cloud with red eyes that felt way more evil. I denounced any religion saying I don't want to get involved and it subsided. Don't remember falling asleep but it must have left. Moved country at 18 and never had anything of that nature ever happen again. Really bizarre childhood and I'm still baffled as to WTF it was. Parents thought it was bullshit or nightmares till my father actually saw it throw a bucket of my toys at him when he ran in because I was screaming. It's still a really big question mark in my life. My parents live in a tiny town and I start having to drive out to visit at night time, as I work during the day. Driving in the dark doesn't bother me at all. One trip out, it's dark and I'm driving past a rundown barn. There are lots of abandoned homesteads in rural Alberta. I see a man hitchhiking on the road past this barn. I think I'm just tired and seeing things so I slow down and really look. It's definitely a man, nothing wrong. He smiles and waves. I don't pick him up as I'm a small girl alone and he's about 1 kilometer from the next town. I have a nice visit and forget all about it. The next time I'm driving out, and it's dark. I see the same freaking man walking past the same freaking barn. I slow down again because I'm thinking I must be losing it. He smiles and waves again. I hightail it out of there, and anytime I drive out at night now I take a different route. There was nothing remarkable about him, indistinguishable clothes, Didn't get any weird hair standing on end moment seeing him. He stayed in my rearview mirror the whole time, but I know it was the same man. Months apart, different times of night. I'm what you'd call a skeptic, but I can't explain this one. When I was 20, I made a documentary in a jail that was said to be haunted. Brought a psychic in who told us all kinds of stuff that creeped us out. Spent the night there. Didn't see anything but a lot of creepy vibes. Fast forward to the next weekend, I'm hanging out with my girlfriend and we decide to go sledding at this popular spot at night. I head out to warm the car up as she's getting ready. While I'm in the car, the smell of beer gets really strong. No beer in the car, but it smelled like you'd expect if all the seats were soaked in it. A minute later she comes around the corner and the smell disappears instantly. Weird, okay. Go sledding, take her home, head to my house. As soon as I walk in the door, it smells like a barn. I grew up on a farm but we hadn't had animals in 8 years and this was the smell of someone just having come in from the barn doing chores. I hadn't smelled that smell in the house for 8 years. Try to brush it off and go to sleep. Talked to the psychic the following Monday and told her about it. She casually just told me that one of the ghosts from the jail likely attached itself to me and followed me home. Creeped the duck out of me. There were a few other times where you'd think you saw a shadow person out of the corner of your eye. Years later it came to be found that right across the street from us out in the country in a field, was an unmarked graveyard. A farmer in the 30s wanted to widen his field and just picked up all the stones and dumped them along a stone fence and that was that. We had some interesting shaped rocks in our flower bed that we later assumed must have been from that graveyard. Yikes. I had a lot of weird shit happen in a house I grew up in New Jersey. I had a room in the basement at the bottom of a flight of stairs. Each night as I was falling asleep a tall figure in a black trench coat and long legs and arms would come to me with a black briefcase. And I guess he was kind of asking for permission to duck with me. If I got scared or too jumpy I would snap out and it would end. Each night I would push it a little bit further. Eventually he came right up to me after months of practice and when he did I felt hands all over my body pulling me in different directions. Needless to say it scared the duck out of me and when I woke up I was across my room dragged out of bed with covers all over my room. Whatever it was trying to drag me towards the stairs. True story. Getting chills flashing back right now. When I was 4 we moved into a large old town house. Every summer we would go on holiday and one of my many cousins would look after the house. Go in on an afternoon, turn on the lights, close the curtains etc. Sometimes when they would go out partying, they would stay at ours because it was walking distance from town. First cousin said never again, they said someone watching them when they woke up during the night and left. Then the second cousin said something similar, then the third said they saw someone fall from the ceiling and land on top of them. Slowly each family member refused to stay over. We even had neighbors say they would see someone walking around our house and were wondering why we would not answer. I never saw anyone but I swear I used to always hear someone in the loft coming down the creaky old ladders, or someone coming upstairs. We eventually moved when I was 17. My parents finally said yeah we used to see and hear things all of the time lol. Growing up, I would always have dreams of demons and Cerberus chasing me, and I needed to fight. I mean from a young age 4/5. As I got older, I always had an uneasy feeling at home, and my mom would mention hearing voices at night, and she would burn sage regularly to help keep activities at bay. In high school, I had a friend who had mentioned feeling uneasy in my house as well and said that her mom could see and speak to spirits and asked if I wanted her to come to our house. I said sure, although I was terrified of what she'd say. So she comes in the house and we give the usual tour for someone who has never been at your house before. We walked into my bedroom and she immediately went and opened my closet. Which was odd. She said, "Very nice," and closed it, then walked away. Went into my brother's room. Immediately turned and walked out, and it was like she couldn't get out of the house fast enough. She then told my friend everything she saw/felt while there who translated it to me. They were Laotian, and I had picked up on some of the language but didn't fully understand it. Basically, I had an ancestor who loved and cared for me very much, protecting me from the evil in the house each night. She was in my closet, which was why she opened it up. She described her, and I immediately knew it was my great aunt who I had lost when I was 5 years old. It was confirmed through a picture I had that was who she saw/spoke to. My brother's room was the kicker. There were 3 spirits on his bed. A soldier, a little boy, and an old witch with white hair/eyes who hated us and did everything she could to drive us as a family apart. Which made sense because we had a very rough toxic upbringing with many fights. What made the hair stand up on my body was we were telling my brother this days later. He deadass looked us in the eyes when we described what my friend's mom said the witch looked like and said I know, because I've seen her. Then explained to us why he dove himself into religion at a young age. We went to church, but my brother was always much more serious and into it than the rest of us, and why he was studying to be a pastor, because growing up she would torment him and tell him she was going to kill us all and she was stronger than God and he couldn't save us. So yeah, I believe in ghosts and evil because I've lived it. There's many stories that stem from this, but I'm glad we moved the duck out not long after and I will never go back. My friend's mom also said she would never go in our basement. She didn't elaborate on what she felt was down there, but she refused to even speak past, "Don't go down there, or I wouldn't go there." My dad also saw something down there he won't speak about, but I know it scared the shit out of him. I'm not sure it was a ghost, but around 1995 I encountered what is commonly called a shadow person. At the time I was living in a double-wide mobile home that my late wife and I had purchased new. The home had been set up on what had previously been farmland. The location had never been the site of any home of any kind, and is at least 1,000 feet from where any house is or has to the best of my knowledge ever been. In light of this you would not think that home would be a likely location for a haunting. However, my late wife and I did on occasion seen several rather strange occurrences there, the most startling of which I will relate here. This encounter took place at night, after my wife and I had retired for the evening. Normally at night my wife and I would leave a light on all night in the bathroom farthest from our bedroom because there were usually children in the house. That bathroom was just outside the children's bedrooms and would provide them with a nightlight. However, on that night, all the children were staying somewhere else and there was no one in the house except my wife and I. As was usual though, we had left the light in the bathroom on out of habit and it cast a glow through our open bedroom door, weakly lighting the room. Some time had passed after we had laid down, and I was unable to sleep. I assumed though, that my wife was asleep because her breathing had become regular and reached a point at which it sounded like she was asleep. While lying there unable to sleep, I began to become aware of a presence that I could not explain other than to say I knew we were not alone. I was laying there trying to convince myself that it was only my imagination when suddenly and silently a figure moved in through our bedroom door and proceeded parallel to our bed in a smooth gliding motion. Then rounding the corner of our bed took up a fixed position at the foot of our bed. Strangely, I seemed to be acutely aware that this entity was conscious of us and was intently watching us while I was laying there watching it. The entity can best be described as a something that had the appearance of black smoke or a shadow, however it was more material than either of these but less material than a real person. The strangest thing about this whole situation was my complete lack of fear. Although I was acutely aware that some being had entered our room and there was no doubt in my mind that it was absolutely not of this earth, at least not as we perceive it, it did not seem to arouse any fear response in me. I would say it aroused a feeling that would fit somewhere between creepy and curiosity, especially considering the fact that I was sure it was aware of me as I was of it. After some time I had almost convinced myself that I was imagining it due to my drowsy condition and the dim light. Suddenly, I realized that my wife was no longer breathing like she was asleep. Her breathing had become almost silent. Speaking in a calm voice, I said, "Honey, you awake?" To which she answered yes. Then I added, "Do you see anything?" I was expecting her reply to be, "What do you mean?" But instead, much to my surprise, she said, "You mean that thing standing at the foot of the bed?" When she said this I did finally become somewhat nervous and we both then began to pray. We lay there for about 10 minutes softly saying prayers and then it was gone. But it didn't just disappear. Over a period of about 20 seconds became less solid, like smoke clearing, and our perception of its presence became weaker and weaker until it just wasn't there anymore. Then it was as if it had never been there. Nothing like this has ever happened since, and the only evidence that it ever did are my memories of it. When I was about 5 years old, I woke up one night to find two figures standing in my room. Although I was scared, the figures appeared calm and watchful and curious. I sometimes covered my eyes with my hands, peeking through my fingers and hoping they would go away, but they stayed. Also, being 5 years old, whenever I had a bad dream, I would just call my mom's name once or twice and she would wake up immediately. She was a very light sleeper and could hear anything from my room easily. In this case, I screamed for my mom for what felt like 20 minutes. Nothing happened, except that the two figures continued to stand in the center of my room and curiously stare at me. Side note, they also didn't look human. Anyway, after an extended amount of time, my mom finally heard me. As soon as she was about to open the door, they vanished. This experience totally changed my life. As a kid, although seeing ghosts or apparitions in your room was normal. I've had other supernatural things happen since then, and that's built me into a believer in the unexplained. A lot of stuff that people experience, including myself, can be easily debunked by science and physics. Low-frequency standing air waves or high levels of M radiation affecting brain function, pareidolia, mass hysteria, hypnagogic hallucinations due to sleep paralysis/sleep deprivation, etc. But one experience. My sister and I were exploring this abandoned mansion in Fair Oaks, California. Not ghost hunting or anything, just experiencing a house that has been frozen in time for over 100 years. It was the middle of the afternoon, both of us were wide awake. As we made our way to the third floor, we would both hear random bumps and odd noises behind us, but wrote it off as it just being the effects of two people walking through a wooden structure with unstable foundations. We got to the attic door, and it wasn't locked but still warped in the frame and jammed shut. We were discussing whether or not to force it open, when from less than 3 feet behind us. "Please don't." Clear as day, as if a young woman was standing right behind us. We got the duck out of there quickly lol. In the late 1980s/early 1990 I was a unit clerk in a hospital in Los Angeles, and one part of my job was to do the birth certificates. People often ask me for name suggestions, and, because I did not really care what they named their kid, I would always just suggest the name on the most recent birth certificate. One night, I was in a room with a new mom and her baby to ask if she was ready to do the birth certificate. She asked what I thought they should name the baby. I started to give her my automatic answer when suddenly I felt a jolt and thought, heard? Felt? No, tell her the truth. And so I looked at the baby and told her I thought he should be named Galen. Without skipping a beat, she said that is what my husband wants to name him. He had a brother named Galen that died, but I am afraid they will tease him and call him gay. I told her I knew a boy named Galen and he was a well-liked boy. And as far as I knew, he was not teased about his name. It was very strange that she did not seem surprised when I suggested this very unusual name. I was not aware of any discussion about the baby's name prior to this. I later learned they did name the baby Galen. I hope he likes his name. In high school there was this house that sat on the outskirts of the small town I lived in. Must have been built in the 50s, but clearly abandoned. Every now and then a few friends and I would go out there, only in the day to sneak around and check it out. The old owners had to have left in a hurry, because there was so much stuff still in the house, like a couch, checkbooks, some clothes, random stuff. And we'd peek around being stupid high school kids. It was 2-story house with a pretty dank basement that I'd personally only been in once. It just stank and was pretty gross. Stairs to the second floor, with 2 bedrooms on both sides, nothing super big. Well, one night, sometime in late September, a group of us went out. 3 of them our sibling, 2 boys and a younger girl, our other friend, and me. We stopped by the local Casey's to get gas, and one of the boys comes in with me. Thinking it would be funny, I bought an air horn and he got silly string to scare the others while we go into this old, creepy house. It was dark out and figured we'd have a bit of fun. Pull up to the house, turn the car off and we all start up to the house. Door is unlocked, as it always is, so we go in through the back. Playing around in the living room and kitchen, being stupid, going through cabinets and closets. Nothing really interesting, so we turned out attention to the upstairs bedrooms. Now this is the weirdest shit I've ever experienced in my whole life. The order is the oldest sibling, our guy friend, the little sister, younger brother and me in the back. I'm getting ready to blow the air horn when the door to the right bedroom, upstairs, starts to close. Not fully, but enough to get everyone's attention. We all freeze on the stairs and turn our flashlights off. I'm holding my breath to listen to any sounds, and everyone is deathly silent. About a minute passes before the flashlights go back on, when what I can only explain is the loudest crashing I've ever heard. It sounded like someone had picked up the stos and threw it across the kitchen. I bolt to the door with my other friend, only to find that it's now locked. We ended up leaving through a window, and ran to the car. When we got there, I could hear my friends still screaming inside, so we both jogged back to the door to find them all panicking trying to get it open. For some ducking reason, we could open it from the outside, and we all ran back to the car and got in. Drove away, and myself and the young girl sibling are crying, while the guys are trying to make sense on what the hell happened. Now, I'm 32 years old, don't believe in ghosts. But I have absolutely no idea what that was. No one was in the house with us. The noise came from behind me, in a room we all had just been in. The door was locked after we had all just came through it. I rarely tell this story, because I feel crazy for it. I never went back to the house, and when I did years later, it had been demolished. So, as a child every summer, my dad would take me to a Cub Scout camp. When we went, my dad had us registered as staff. We started going when I was about 5, and I could lead my own patrols without any problems. Fast forward to years later when I'm finally in my mid-teenage years. I was about 14 or 15 when it happened. It was at night and I was going around with my brother and one of our friends to each campsite just to make sure everyone was good before lights out. At the last campsite that we went to, They offered for us to have some s'mores with them. We happily accepted. Sitting around for about an hour, the fire started dying out. My friend asked if he could go back up to the cabin where we were sleeping for the night to get firewood from his trunk of his car. I was always pretty quick and could carry quite a bit, so I said sure, why not? Got his keys and went on my way. On my way up to the cabin, I was walking with a purpose, with some pep in my step. Something didn't feel right. Normally, I keep my eyes forward looking at the cabin, but something grabbed my attention. In a small opening on the way, I saw a silhouette of a human form. It had a strange dark red outline. The thing had to be at least 7 feet tall because it was taller than me by quite a bit. I had already been almost 6 myself at the time. The scariest thing that still to this day that freaked me out was its eyes. I locked eyes with this thing. It had glowing yellow eyes that as I looked into them, the eyes kept getting brighter and brighter. Even though I was terrified, I couldn't run. I tried. All I could do was slowly walk away, but I couldn't run. My muscles felt frozen, but I managed to keep walking away. Each step felt like at least 2 or 3 minutes long. Once I got about 10 feet away, it felt as though whatever was holding on to me broke free. Once I got my freedom back, I broke out on a full sprint back to the cabin. Didn't leave there until the next morning. One of my good friends in high school had this lake house. It was given to his parents by their grandparents, and they lived in this house from 90 to 93. One day in 93, his mom woke him and his younger sister up and left the house. Mind you, it was 2 to 3 a.m. They went to a restaurant that was open 24/7 and stayed there until sunrise and went home, packed all of their clothing and other important things and left the house. They never went back, and his mother will not talk about what happened. They still own this property. It has 2 homes on it and is lakefront, probably worth millions. The power is still on and his dad comes and checks on it every so often. So in hearing that story, we of course went to the lake house. Pulling up a motion sensor flood light flicked on and stayed on. Unlocked the deadbolt, which requires a key to open on both sides, and walked in. Instantly you got that creepy feeling like someone was watching you. We walked around for about half an hour, walking up the stairs and unlocking another door with a deadbolt on both sides, and man was it eerie, all the furniture still set up, his sister's nursery still intact, and a tea kettle still on the stove. Just straight up creepy in every way. Finally we go to leave and decide to go through the garage. I have the keys and, again, you had to have a key to unlock it from the inside. I'm trying to open the door and turn around to get a light, just in time to see a rock come from somewhere down the hall and hit my foot. Staring at all 3 of my friends and not seeing them do anything with their arms or leg or anything else, I decide to try to unlock the door more rapidly. Finally find the right key and put it in the keyhole. As soon as I do, the garage door opens about 2 feet, and thanks to the motion sensor floodlight that's still on, I can see a chair in the garage. The chair proceeds to be thrown against the wall with a violence I can't describe, and the garage door is slammed shut. I turn around to say let's get the hell out of here and see a rock come from darkness and hit the wall with a lot of force right next to my head. At this point I'm done. We run back to the stairs down to the basement, and for the safety of the door we came in, the door, which requires a key on either side to lock or unlock and we left unlocked, is locked. Freaking out hearing what sounds like heavy running footsteps upstairs, I'm panicking to find the key. Finally I find it and unlock the door. We run to the next door and you guessed it, locked. I again find the right key as the footsteps are getting louder and coming down the stairs. We run out the door and it gets left open by the last person out, and then as we go to shut it, the door is slammed shut and instantly you hear the deadbolt get locked. At this point we are only focusing on getting out of this place. We run to the truck and all 4 of us pile in, and as soon as the truck starts every single light in the house comes on. At once, my buddy slams it into reverse and we are flying down this very long driveway, and as soon as our tires leave the gravel and hit the pavement, every light in the house turns off, leaving it in absolute darkness. Something very very bad is in that house. Not sure what, but I'll never go back, and I absolutely believe in ghosts, demons, etc. Believe it or not, this is the short version of this story, and the backstory of the house is even creepier. There's a bridge near where I grew up in Bumduck, Tennessee that is notorious for screaming at people at night. The screams aren't audible to the houses nearby, and supposedly you have to sit on the actual bridge to hear it at all, though I personally haven't tested it or anything. The common explanation is that it's a bobcat that lives under the bridge, but people have checked with dogs and such and never find signs of any. Well, some friends and myself had heard this story for years all growing up but never tested it. So one night after a few beers we get up the notion we're going to go test the thing. So 5 drunk guys pile into a beat up car and we drive down and park on the bridge. This is 1:30 a.m. and it's dead silent out. We sat there for a good 45 minutes and nothing happened. We had the windows down and had started debating whether or not it was all bullshit when the scream happened. We had the lights off and there was a moon, so you could see pretty well, and there for sure wasn't anything outside the car, but it was ducking loud and it sounded just like a woman with particularly powerful lungs having her skin ripped off right outside the window on the rear passenger side that faced off the edge of the bridge. Now I've heard bobcats in heat while hunting, and they do like a scream 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 kind of thing. It's hard to describe, but they do it in little repeating bursts. This was a good 3 to 4 seconds extended scream at incredible volume. We tore out of there like a demon was chasing us. A couple of miles down the road we finally stopped and actually processed what happened. My adrenaline was going so badly and I was so scared I was just shaking uncontrollably. One of my friends had actually pissed himself, which I'd never seen anyone actually do. One friend immediately left the car and vomited. To give what I think was a good frame of reference to how actually terrifying this was, my friend whose car we were in wasn't even mad at the friend that pissed all over his seat. It was insane. To this day I have no explanation for it. I wouldn't say 100% it made me believe in ghosts or something, but definitely opened my mind to the idea that there's some grain of truth or at least something ducky going on that starts such stories. I saw my great aunt Terry in the woods on night. My friends and I would play airsoft when we were younger. There were 4 of us, and only one in white. As I'm looking around for somebody, I see her and freeze. As I stood there, my friend who was wearing white shot me from my right. I see him laying down and confirming it was him, and I look back to see my aunt still standing there. What I assume would be 20 to 30 yards from me in the opening of the trees. She smiles, turns around, and walks away into the trees. I dropped my gun and ran to see if what I saw was real or not. The entire time I'm running, I am being smacked with branches from head to toe. As I got to where it looked like she was standing, I realized she wouldn't be able to walk without hitting her face or breaking branches like I had done to get to her. As I started to walk in her direction, she went, and I was immediately met with a branch that would have hit her right in the face that she would have had to walk through. My Aunt Terry always looked after me, my mom and grandmother. Passed away 3 days after I was born, and the family all says I have her eyes and energy. Although I never met her, I've seen her since then around my house, but this was the first time I knew I saw her. I just don't know why she revealed herself that night. Mum's brother was into black magic. I never believed him. I was very logical since childhood. I was 12 when I went over to stay at his place for a month with my younger brother. Watching a movie on a rental VCR in 1997. Roughly midnight, power cut. I'm desperately waiting for power to come back so I could finish the movie. Idiot brother fast asleep, mother fast asleep, uncle's family fast asleep. There were about 6 people who slept while watching the movie on the same bed. Uncle not home. He's gone somewhere to do black magic and send the thing to someone's place to duck someone up. The thing is an entity he would summon to get dirty shit done for money. I've never seen it but only heard about it. So that night, the room door suddenly opens, I'd say about 30 degrees inwards on its own in 3 bursts. The door was very hard to open for us kids as it would scrape against the clay floor. This triggers the logical man inside me. I'm thinking, how the duck did that door open on its own? There's no way wind could do that. That shit would require a lot of force. The door is towards my feet. I could see outside through this slot now that's about 5 inches wide. Twilight makes it look like dawn. Suddenly I see a shadow kinda glide from left to right to left. And there's 2 of them. Absolutely no sound of footsteps. Then I see lit matches flying across like someone is playing with them. Then one steps inside the room. The entity is standing in the slit. I'd say about 5 feet tall. The weird thing is, I can sort of see through it. It looked like a stick figure with an aura around it. Can see through this aura which distorts the twilight, like you see in the movie Predator. But right in the middle of this aura looks like a stick figure. Partially invisible. Then this entity enters the room. I'm squinting my eyes trying not to be seen. There's a ton of shit on the floor, not even a little bit of sound of footsteps stepping on anything. Logical me thinks, this thing can see in dark. Can see me too squinting. I'm thinking I'm ducked. Possibly getting abducted. I close my eyes, woke up in the morning and explained to everyone what happened. My mum found the burnt matches, verifies my story. Uncle comes back from his job. Tells us that he was trying to send this thing to someone's house but it could not cross Water River and bounce to his own house. Which is what I saw. Still have no explanation to this. One night I was sitting on the couch with my dog watching TV at around 10:30 p.m. when suddenly I heard my mom call from her bedroom, which is right across the hallway from the stairs leading to the back door. She said, "Come here and let the dog out," which I thought was odd because the dog was with me. I didn't think much of it, so I turned around and tried to get the dog to move and she wouldn't budge off the couch at all. Just as I was about to reply back saying the dog clearly didn't want to go outside, my eyes met the gaze of the orange streetlight outside, illuminating the empty driveway. Another time when I was still in high school, my best friend and I were on the bus heading back home. My friend nudged me, pointing at a silver car pulled over on the side of the road, probably within 1 to 2 minutes from my house. A familiar looking decal was hanging from the rear view mirror and a woman was inside wearing a dark blue jacket with short curly brown hair, asking me if that was my mom. We both laughed because my mom is known for sitting in our driveway for up to 20 minutes on her phone before she comes through the door, so we both thought she couldn't wait until she got home from work to check, and we didn't think much of it. As the bus passed by my house, we both noticed my mom's car was boxed in between my dad's truck and my brother's cars, unable to move. Another day I was leaving my room to make some lunch when I heard my mom call to me from downstairs. At first I didn't hear her, so I moved closer to the steps and I hollered down to her, asking her to repeat herself once more. She sounded off and was asking me to come down to help her with the laundry, something she'd never do. Just as I was about to place my foot on the top step, I remembered my mom telling me she was going to be home later in the evening and that I was completely alone. I once got a job to install a security system in an old house. The family that moved in there had a little 5-year-oldish boy. The boy was playing around by himself and he would sometimes ask random questions to what seemed like me. I answered one of his questions and I remember him telling me, "Oh sorry, I was just talking to my friend." The mother poked her head in and told me that he had found a new friend since they moved in. She then leaned in closer and jokingly said, "It's actually kind of creepy." Well, later that day the boy was in the kitchen playing and he was trying to reach a bag of chips on top of their fridge. I told him he should probably get down off the counter and I could get them down for him. He proceeds to get down and say, "Oh, my friend will get it." I just kind of shrugged it off and went back to working on running the cable through the wall. All of a sudden the bag of chips explodes on the floor. I turned around thinking the kid must have gotten back on the counter, but instead was on the floor picking up the chips. He gave me a look and said my friend accidentally knocked them off. I asked the boy where his friend was now and he points on top of the fridge and said, "He is right up there smiling at you." I never got such a freaky chill in my life. My childhood home is haunted. Where my house is, there used to be another house. It burned down, and the father of the family who lived there died in the basement during the fire. The family sold the land, and the house was cleared away and a new house built over the old basement. My grandmother, who lives in the same town, knows the family. Anyways, my parents bought the new house when I was a toddler and we've lived there for 20 years. The ghost of the guy who died in the fire, named Charlie, lives in our house, and it's pretty obvious. My mom says that once, when she and my dad were arguing, she took to the bedroom to cool off. She said, "Charlie, I wish you could knock some sense into him." Not 5 minutes later, my dad starts swearing from the living room. The shelves above his chair had fallen and knocked him in the head. They've never fallen before or since. Any animal we have, a couple dogs when I was a kid, my cat now, will stare down the hallway for long stretches of time, then go bananas chasing something from the living room at one end to the bedrooms at the other, like they're playing with someone. I personally have heard footsteps, big, heavy footsteps, like someone wearing work boots, walk up and down the hallway, especially at night. It scared me as a kid, but now I just take it as Charlie checking on our safety. My grandmother, while visiting us one time, woke up in the guest bedroom to a shadow man standing in the doorway. She hid under the blanket for a few minutes, then decided it was safe. When she came out of the blanket, the shadow man was at her bedside, leaning over her. She hid under the blanket again until she fell asleep. The most concrete evidence for me was the time Charlie scared something off. My bedroom was always the coldest room in the house, and often I felt uncomfortable in there, like I was sitting next to someone who disliked me. One day, I went to grab clothes for a shower, and walked right into a wall of evil halfway down the hall. I can't describe it fully, nothing looked different, I just felt like I had physically crossed a barrier into a force field of hatred. I knew without a doubt in my body that I was in danger, and without thinking, I hauled ass to the opposite end of the house, to the kitchen. I stood at the stove, shaking. I was about 14, afraid to look down the hallway in case I saw whatever was down there, but afraid that if I didn't look, it would sneak up on me. I eventually convinced myself that I was being a baby, and started slowly through the dining room and towards the hall, afraid the entire time. All at once, I felt a strong breeze blow by my left side, going down the hall towards my room, like how it feels when someone runs by you and barely avoids running into you. And I thought for a second that I heard a man's voice. I continued down the hall, and I couldn't feel the evil anymore. I went into my room, and it felt lighter and more comfortable than it ever had in my life. I thanked Charlie, and from then on, I've never felt that uncomfortable feeling in my room. I think he protects it now. But yeah, growing up in a haunted house is pretty convincing emo. Okay, This happened when I was 6 and I am nearly 50 now, so my memory is a little hazy. I had a friend the same age as me called Kelly. We used to hang out together with other children who lived in our block and local area. One afternoon Kelly knocked on my door. I answered and she asked if I could go to the corner shop with her to get some bananas so that we could make a milkshake. Before I could answer, my stepmother called down the stairs to say I had to clean my room and was not going anywhere. Kelly kind of shrugged and said she was going anyway, and that was the last I saw of her. Early evening came and her mother had knocked on every door looking for her. All of the dads got together and went looking for her. It got later and later, and when I went to bed she had still not been found. In the early hours of the morning I heard a noise outside of my bedroom window, a kind of intermittent moaning. When I looked out, I saw a policeman was sat on the wall sobbing and being comforted by another policeman. I watched for a while and then went downstairs. My dad told me Kelly had been found dead and the cops in front of our block. I later found out Kelly had been murdered by one of the older boys who hung out with us. I had to give a statement as I had seen Kelly the day before. Later police fed back that Kelly had been killed hours before she knocked on my door, and that my recollection of events was impossible. The man who owned the corner shop said Kelly had never come in to buy bananas. I'm pretty sure the police thought I was lying and that my mother was either lying as well or mistaken about what she'd heard. From that time onwards I have believed that Kelly came to visit one more time before she left for good, and since then the idea of the paranormal has just seemed normal. When I was a child, we had this antique closet with a large mirror attached on it. It was located in my room on the second floor. It has large windows and they decided to put it just in front of the windows. One night I can't seem to fall asleep and for some reason I glance at the closet. Then saw a lady coming out of the mirror. I remember her leaning. She was tall with very long curly hair and wore white dress. It went on till I reached 4th grade. There are times I would have dreams about her, and in those dreams she would come out of the closet looking just like my mother. Haven't seen it personally myself, but a family member did. One instance happened in 2016 and another in 2021. It has been happening ever since. My grandfather passed away from a massive heart attack while at another city. It was certainly a shock to the family as he was in good health. After receiving the news, the family arranged to have the funeral set about 4 to 5 days later back in the city. With the funeral complete, about 3 to 4 days later weird activities started to occur at my grandparents' house. The house has 2 levels, a ground level and an upper level. The ground level had the main living room, a bedroom down a hallway along with a bathroom, an office and storage room across from the bathroom and the hallway, and a kitchen to the right of the main living room with a maid's living quarters attached to it separated by a door. The upper level has 3 bedrooms and 1 living quarter with 1 couch. About 3 to 4 days after the funeral, one of the maids said that she saw the dogs in the front yard driveway suddenly start to act very happy as if somebody was returning home. The thing was, she didn't see anyone at the front yard driveway when that was happening. About 2 days later, things turned very weird at the house. One of the maids was out at the mall shopping supplies for the house while the other maid was home. The maid at home saw the maid who was at the mall at the house during that time. When the maid came back from the mall, she told the other maid that she swore that she was home the whole time. The maid who was at the mall would later tell us later on that she could hear a man whisper in her ear at night to wake up now and footsteps right outside the door on the upper level. Roughly a week later, my aunt and other family members decided to visit my grandmother to check up on her to see how she was doing. My grandmother decided to take them to the storage room to give my aunt something during the visit. When my aunt was about to enter the storage room, she said that she could see a man in the corner of the storage room standing still and staring down at her. Fast forward to 2021, my grandmother passed away. During this time, my aunt visited the house to make sure the house was taken care of by the housemaids. She decided to sleep over there for the night, and during her stay, she said that she would see my deceased grandmother walking around the house. My aunt would later say that she would see my grandmother sitting down in the seat at the kitchen table where she would always sit in for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She would also say that she would hear my grandmother knock on the bedroom door and say, "Hi, can you unlock the door so I can enter?"